Alright, we are going to show you how to make this mask with all its parts and pieces, including a nose wire, outside lining with a pocket for a filter, adjustable cord for around the ears on both sides, and a neckline strap so that when you take the mask off, it can just hang around the neck to easily be put back on when you're ready to wear it. What you will receive in the kit is 2 cords with the spring clasps already on them and the knots tied at the end. For the adjustable straps around the ears, you'll get the 4-inch garden wire, which will be used to form and shape the part of the mask that goes around the nose. You'll get a strip of fabric to be used for the strap that will hold the mask around the neck. And then you'll have 2 sheets of the lining pre-pinned for the first sewing, and then 2 pieces of the fabric for the outer layer pre-pinned for the first sewing. All right, the first piece you're going to do is you're going to take this fabric strap and you're going to take the top edge, or one of the edges, there's no top or bottom, just an edge, and you're going to fold it over so that each end is lined up at the top, up here, and at the center of the fabric. Then you're going to fold it over like that. And then you're just going to kind of handle it so that the rest of it sort of falls in place so that you can start getting the sewing going. Alright, so you'll just want to keep that lined up as you continue to sew on the sewing machine. And if you want to press that with an iron, you can do that. Or if you want to pin it or clip it, you can do that, of course, as well. But my guess is your skill set will allow you to just hold it in place as you sew it, and you just keep maneuvering the fabric as you continue to sew. All right, so put that end in. Get as close with that 1/4 inch border to the end that's open. Get the next bit of it lined up and ready to go. Hold it in place. That's it. There's no need for a double stitch because that will be sewn into the mask and secured.
Action.
All right, now we're going to sew the first seam for the first sew line for the lining. So we're just going to go along here. We're going to go over that twice. And again here, we're not going to really worry about the double stitch, but we are going to do it twice for some security because this will be the part that's in front of the mouth. And we need to make sure there aren't any big holes there. Second time. All right, now we will sew a stitch across here on both sides. This is also a 1/4 inch seam allowance with no double stitch. Okay, now we will do the second side. It's just a one-time pass with no double stitch. Alright, to take away some of the bulkiness when we put this together, we're going to just take a little bit of the seam allowance here and on the bottom. And we'll do this for the lining as well as the exterior fabric. Alright, if there's any excess, like this one has a big flap, just cut it off. Go ahead and cut it even like this, so it's kind of a straight line, just to get rid of some of that bulk. Alright, now we're going to do the same seam allowance on the curved part of the outer fabric, 1/4 inch seam allowance with no double stitch. 2 times we're passing over. Alright, now that this edge is sewn, we're going to do the same thing with the trimming of some of this excess seam allowance over by the chin and the nose, what will be the chin and the nose of the mask. So just cut into a little bit here, so also help around the nose area when we go to insert the wire. Okay, now it's time to start sewing these together. So we're going to take the lining and turn the lining right side out so that we can match it up. So first let me just show you, I have them both with the nose on top and the chin on the bottom. So you can tell because even though they look very similar, you'll start to get familiar with how this one hooks a little bit further. So turn it right side out, and we're going to line up the tip of the nose of the liner, of the lining, with the tip of the nose of the exterior piece. And then we're going to pin that. So just make sure this part, that those pieces get lined up perfectly. So that'll make a difference in the final product.
Go for that again.
So I'm just going to pin it here. And then because this is the top and we're going to put a wire in, I want to make sure that I have enough space for the wire to come in. So we're going to sew a little bit bigger of a seam allowance, but please make sure that you're very careful to have the edges perfectly lined up there. That will make sure that there are no gaps or openings in those seam lines. Now on the chin area, because we'll be inserting the strap that will go around the neck, we need to leave a little space there, but we're going to start off the same by looking for those two seams and lining those up, pinning those together, or using whatever you have, if you have clips. So we have, in this one we want to have at least 3/4 of an inch. So I would say pin it at a marker so that you know where to stop sewing, or from this edge. 3/4 of an inch from this edge, or an inch, somewhere around there. You will be inserting this strap here later, and you need to have enough room for that to be on the edge. Okay, so when you sew around the nose, you're going to go in about 1/2 inch to leave room for the wire. On this one, you do want to do a double stitch. Okay, so my stitch got a little wonky, but the main thing is to make sure that the wire can fit in there. Okay, so you're going to insert the wire from here. Now we're going to sew around the chin. And we're going to start at that marker pin that we put in, so that we do not want to sew this end down. Leave that open at least 3/4 of an inch. Do not worry about a double stitch there, because you'll go over it later for that. Alright, sew to your needle marker. Again, you don't need a double stitch there, because we're going to double stitch that later. So you can see how the stitch line ends before the edges, so that you can put those straps in. Alright, now that you've sewn the top and the bottom, you're going to grab the seam allowance for the lining and the exterior, and pull that open and shove that down with your hand so that it pops out the other side. Then you're going to grab that while you're gently maneuvering the fabric through. Don't just pull on it, because it might rip some of the seams or the fabric itself. So now you can start to see where it's kind of coming together. That'll be the front, and then the lining will fit right perfectly in with that. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to make sure that this part, so you can see how there's all this gap space there. We need to make sure none of that gap space is there. So we want to pull the seam through as far as we can, so that it's nice and clean on the edge. Do you want to take a picture of that? Pins are your clips, and then you're just going to pin it there. Once in the middle, just hold that in place. And believe me, I know it takes a little bit of extra time, but it's worth it later, because I tried to shortcut it and not do that, and then unfortunately it came out where one of the fabrics on either side was either too short or too long, and it didn't look nice and it didn't function well. So take just a little bit of time to make sure that that is nice and clean. Do that on the top and the bottom. Remember, you will have a little bit of that gap for the strap. So this is where you bring the strap in. And I always like to have this stitch line, it's going to be closer to one side than the other. It's really nice to have that because now it's easy to see, to keep it uniform. I always do this stitch line closer to the outside of the mask. I put it about this far in, doesn't have to go too far, and you make sure that this little piece gets folded over, as well as this piece gets folded over. Get that nice tight little seam. Try to get as close to that edge as possible. It just looks better on the mask when it's closer to that edge. And then go ahead and pin that. For sewing. And this part, you want to go like this. You feel like you want to do that, but don't do that. Give it about a 1/4 inch seam allowance there too, so when you sew that, you're going to sew right over that at the same time. So finish pulling through this fabric and making it nice and tight. You can see how it just wants to kind of buckle under. See that? Pull that through. So now when you do the strap on the other side, I like to pull it from the original side that I put it in. Make sure that I'm pulling it so that that seam stays on the outside. So both the sides have the seam on the outer edge. So you fold that under and have that on that edge. And just make sure both the outside and the inside have that 1/4 inch seam allowance space. Alright, so now it's ready to be sewn. Same thing here, you're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance like that. You'll need that later when you fold it over for the cording. Okay? Alright, so you're going to take the chin side, fold that over for that 1/4 inch seam allowance. You do not need to do a double stitch here because we're going to sew that later. So just get a one-time pass so you have that side nicely down. So here we're coming to the strap. Make sure you do a pass or two over this just to hold that strap in securely. There really isn't going to be a lot of tension on the strap, but just to kind of give it a nice little secure hold. Now remember, on this end piece, you're folding it with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, so try not to go fold it over more. Alright, so on the top side, the nose side, we do have this flap. It wants to flap over. We need that because when we fold it over later for the cord, that's going to help us have a nice finished look in this space. So it's not exposing the insides. Alright, so now we're doing the top, and we're going to want to make sure that we have at least a 1/2 inch seam allowance here so that we have room to insert the wire through here. So we're going to start off with these little ends, fold that over, and you do not need a double stitch here, so just stitch to hold it in place. And then as you get to this edge, make sure you go that 1/2 inch seam allowance Otherwise, you won't be able to stick the wire through there. Alright, so now we're going to take this 4-inch wire and we slip it right in through there. When you get to that seam, you may have to push through just a little bit. That was why we trimmed that earlier, so that would just be easier for you to put through. Try and get it right to where the center is in that halfway point. Bend it just a little to kind of keep it in place. So now we're going to put in an extra stitch right here just to keep that wire from sliding around. So I'm just going to find where the end of that wire is and put that just outside my foot. Put a little double stitch there, nothing major because that barely moves around at all. That's more for the wash than for while you're wearing it. Same thing on the other side. Scissors and kind of clean that up a little bit. Alright, so now we're going to take the cording that's going to be the adjustable piece to go around the ear, and we're going to sew that in. We're not going to sew on the cording, but we're going to sew it into a little loop here. So we're going to take this end, fold that over, and then stick the cording in there. Push the cording to that outer edge so you have plenty of room for your sewing machine. And just line up that edge with the edge of the inner lining piece. So here I want to get that seam pretty close to this edge right here. So, and making sure that this cord is not going to get under the needle. So I just maneuver it where I need to so I can get close to that edge. You definitely want to double stitch on this one because while it's still not going to be a lot of tension, this is where the biggest amount of tension is going to be. Okay, so we've got the first adjustable ear side done, and you can see that we also have that pocket to insert the filter, the additional filter if they want. So this now can move around. It bunches a little bit to shape the face when you pull on it. You can pull it this way or that way, but that's now in place. We can do the same thing on the other side.